Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you have not been here before, my name is Erin. I am a first-time mama to a beautiful little 7-month-old, almost 8-month-old baby girl named Juniper. On my channel, you will find lots of content on navigating motherhood and also a glimpse into our lives here in beautiful sunny Florida. So if that is content you think you might be interested in seeing more of, definitely consider clicking the subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. So today we are talking all about sleep. I made a video a little while ago when Junie was about 4 months old, 4.5 months old, and I told you guys that we were preparing to start sleep training her. And I told you guys I was gonna give you an update, and then I kind of took all of December off, and well, here we are finally doing an update. And I also want to give you my tips on how we really got her to sleep through the night at 4 months old. I just have my notes here on my phone, but first I want to give you guys a little update on how sleep training went, how her sleep is now, and then I want to go into my sleep training tips, how we really got her to sleep throughout the night, and what I really think did the trick for our baby at least. And stay tuned to the very end of the video because I'm going to be sharing what I would change if I did it all over again. You know, maybe what we'll do different for the second baby. I'm not pregnant, I just mean when we do decide to have a second baby. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the meat of this video. So like I said, I did make a video all on how we were preparing to sleep train. It was sort of going over how we were prepping her room, what sleep training program we were using, her sleep background. So I will link that video up in the iCard. I can never remember what side it's on. Definitely go watch that video if you want a little bit of a background. But basically at 4 months old, we were having to wear her to take all of her naps. Her naps were never really longer than 20-25 minutes. And I know that's pretty typical for 3-4 months old. I've read in many places that that can be a really tough spot for naps for babies. But my poor back just could not handle it anymore. So I knew it was time to start some kind of crib sleep training. And she was also starting to crawl around in our little sidecar crib setup. So we basically had a crib up against the side of our bed, missing a wall, so that it kind of just extended our bed and made a safe sleep space for her. But it was easy for me to roll over and tend to her if I needed to. So she was starting to inchworm around. So it really wasn't safe for her to be sleeping in there anymore. And it was just time. We were also ready to reclaim our bedroom back. And honestly, once we finally started getting her to sleep in her own crib, in her own room, I feel like I sort of started to have my life back a little bit. Like I started to feel a bit more like myself again once I had my sleep space back to myself. So I guess first thing, do I regret sleep training? Absolutely not. Spoiler alert, she sleeps like a champ now, and I'm so excited to tell you what worked for us and how we got there. If you watch that sleep training prep video, you'll also notice that I mentioned that we were going to be slowly night weaning her off of breastfeeding. When we first started the sleep training process, we were at the point where we were down to only one feeding in the middle of the night, and I was getting that shorter and shorter. So by the time we started sleep training, she was already almost night weaned. And actually on that first night, I just decided to not go in there and feed her if things were going well and she wasn't waking up. And that's what I did. So ever since that first night at 4.5 months, when we put her in her crib for the first time at night, I have not gone in there to nurse her once. Definitely took some time for my boobies to get used to that. They were a little engorged at first, lots of leakiness in the middle of the night, but now they don't leak at all and they're pretty good at regulating and just, you know, turning on the faucet when she goes to drink. And also in that video, I mentioned that we used the Taking Care of Babies sleep course. We decided to use a sleep course because I'm the type of person where if I have directions that I can follow, I will stick to it. But if I have liberties and am able to sort of make it up as I go along, I will cheat. And I knew that if I had just some set instructions that I knew I had to follow, I would have stuck with it a lot better. And everything I've read with sleep training is, you know, the more consistent you are with it in the beginning, the less confusing it's going to be for your baby and the faster they're gonna learn, okay, when I'm in my crib, it's time to go to sleep. So just briefly, I did enjoy the course. I still open up the PDFs and refer back to them. They have lots of helpful nap schedules as they grow older and how long their wake windows should be and how often they should be eating and lots of great tips. Yeah, you can sort of piece together what the gist is. It's just basically just a gentle gentle sleep training method, but I highly recommend just paying for the course. That way you have a set thing to follow if you are really iffy and scared about the sleep training process. So I really enjoyed the course. That's the one we used. So essentially you're just going in there at 5 minutes if they're fussing. You're doing a brief, what they call pop in. So you just give them some brief comforting, in and out really quick. And then you do that again at 10 minutes and then at 15 minutes and then every 15 minutes until they fall asleep. Now I'm gonna dive in on how the sleep training process was for us. We were pretty determined to make this happen. So I will say that we didn't do any cheating. We didn't go in there and pick her up, or I didn't breastfeed her to sleep or anything like that. We were pretty good and she picked it up pretty quickly. We were very lucky. I will say the first night was probably one of the roughest, and not rough because she was crying for a long time, but because it was like the hardest cry we heard from her. And I say we, but it was actually only me because Austin had to work late that night and I was so determined to start sleep training that Friday night that I decided to go ahead with it anyways and just be on my own for the first couple hours. And you know your babies cry. You know when they're just fussing and you know when they're screaming bloody murder and it's like that cry that hurts your soul. She did that briefly on the first night. So that first night when I put her down, she didn't start crying initially. She was kind of just exploring the crib, seeing what the heck was going on. About 15 minutes later, she started crying and fussing, and she did that scream cry for a while, and then she seemed to kind of stop. And then she started fussing again. So I did a pop in, and then about 10 minutes later, she finally found a pacifier in her crib and she went to sleep. So then she was asleep for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then she woke up, fussed for 5 minutes, went back to sleep. And then starting at around 5 a.m., she had some early morning wakings where she would wake up and fuss for 5 minutes and then go back to sleep for like 45 minutes. Wake up, fuss for 5 minutes, and go back to sleep. And I've read that this is pretty normal for them to have those early morning wakings. We stuck through it. I will say that through our whole sleep training journey, we never went into her room to comfort her in the middle of the night. Generally, if she ever woke up in the middle of the night, it would just be briefly for about 5 minutes, and then she would go back to sleep. So we never did a pop in after she was asleep for the night. So the first few nights she would wake up after 45 minutes and fuss for a little bit. And I will say after a couple nights, she started to really get it, and as soon as I would put her in her crib, she would lay her head down and she would know it was time to go to sleep. And after she would wake up after 45 minutes, she would typically just fuss, look around for a pacifier, and typically when she found her pacifier, she would then go back to sleep. And to be completely honest, we did not follow the set go in at 5 minutes, go in at 10 minutes, go in at 15 minutes. It was really just, if she was fussing for a while, we would go in and do a pop in. A lot of times we would just want to sort of show her, hey, this is the time to go to sleep. You know, you didn't just take a nap and it's time to get up now. It's time to go to bed. So a lot of times once we went in there and did a pop in, we would rub her back, tell her it's time to go to sleep, and then we would leave. And then she would get really, really upset for about a minute, and then she would calm down and go to sleep and realize, oh, it's time to go to bed. And the reason why we didn't do the set pop-ins at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes is because if she didn't get to the point where it really seemed like she was crying, we didn't want to make it worse with a pop-in. So if she was just doing the minimal fussing and, you know, we could tell she was trying to go to sleep, where she would put her head down, suck on her pacifier, crawl around a little bit, put her head down, you know, fuss a little bit. If she looked like she was trying, it's a skill that they have to learn, putting themselves to sleep. And it's a skill that she did not have when we first started this. We knew she was just learning. And if she looked like she was trying to do it, we wouldn't do a pop-in. And I think that really helped us out, doing minimal pop-ins and just doing that little check-in. If she was really fussy, we would wait for a break in the fuss so that she didn't learn that whenever she fusses really loud, we go in. So basically, if she was fussing really loud, we would wait for a lull in the fuss and then go in and just comfort her and tell her it's time to go to sleep. And then, like I said, she would get really upset, and then about a minute, 5 minutes later, she would go to sleep. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you or share my phone screen because I still keep very detailed track of when she's awake and when she's asleep. I think it's so interesting to see how they evolve. So essentially here on the right side, this is the first time we had her in her crib. You'll see we never breastfed after that first night in the middle of the night. You'll see those red lines, that's where we are nursing. So things were a bit sporadic at first. Like I said, she had those early morning wakings, and at night sometimes she would go to sleep immediately and not wake up, and sometimes she would wake up about after 45 minutes. And then around, I want to say 6 months old, things started to really even out, and she started to really not wake up after she was asleep, especially in the mornings. Those nighttime wakings finally, or those early morning wakings finally went away. And I also want to touch on her naps, because around this time we also started putting her in her crib for all her naps. So once we put her in her crib for that first night of sleep, all of her sleep was going to be in the crib. We stopped doing the wearing her to sleep, and we just didn't want to confuse her. We wanted to let her know that this crib, this is where you sleep. Whenever you're in the crib, you're sleeping. So here, I'll show you the app again from the very beginning. You'll see she's taking very short naps, and the naps were pretty short in the crib to begin with, but that was okay. I was determined to teach her to sleep in the crib. And in the Taking Care of Babies course, she talks about how babies typically conquer nighttime sleep before they conquer daytime sleep. But like I said, with my back, I couldn't wear her to sleep anymore. So crib was where she was gonna nap. And for her naps, what we would do is we would put her in her crib, and if she woke up before an hour, if she didn't nap for a whole hour, we would typically do what they call like a power hour, where we would keep her in the crib for a whole hour. And sometimes she would go back to sleep and sometimes she wouldn't, but we would try the nap for a whole hour. So you'll see she's still doing 3, most of the time 4 naps during the day in her crib, because her naps were just so short. And then finally, around 5 months, they went to 3. In 6 months, starting in January, that's when things really started to even out. You'll see here. She finally started taking longer naps. The first time she took a 2-hour nap in her crib, I think I cried. And then, the next day they wouldn't be very good. And then the next day she would get another 2-hour nap. And then finally she was getting consistently 1 hour to 2-hour naps every single day. And now, recently, we actually switched to 2 naps. So now she's only doing 2 naps a day and sleeping like a champ at night. We will occasionally still do a pop-in here and there if she's going through a developmental leap or she's having just a rough night. Sometimes, occasionally, every night's not perfect. Occasionally we will get a night where she'll still wake up after 45 minutes and fuss and fuss and fuss for maybe a good 15-20 minutes. If she's fussy for longer than 15-20 minutes, we'll do a pop-in. But if she's fussy for like 5-10 minutes, we'll typically, she knows she needs to go to sleep. But if she's still fussy, we'll do a pop-in now. And typically after we do the pop-in, she realizes, oh, this wasn't just a nap, it's time to go to sleep. Especially since we switched from 3 to 2 naps, there were a couple times where we had to sort of go in and say, no, it's time to go to sleep. And then when we left, like I said, she would get so upset and then realize, oh, okay, and then she would go to sleep. It's also gotten easier over time because she has just gotten older. Once they hit 6-7 months, their sleep generally starts to get better and you'll see those naps lengthen. So a lot of times it just depends on their age. She's also gotten better at finding her pacifiers in her crib as she's gotten older, and I think that has helped a lot as well. When she was 4 months old, she would do this little turtle thing where, I don't know why, but she likes to sleep with her little hands under her belly, and then she would go like this and she'd reach her hand out and put it back. She'd do this turtle thing. She'd reach a hand out and swim, try and find a passy, and then she would like scoot forward and then try again. It's very cute, but now she can, she's crawling and she can easily grab a pacifier and put it back in her mouth. So naps have been a lot easier now too. As soon as we put her down in the crib, she knows it's time to go to sleep, and she closes her eyes, lays her head down, grabs her passy, and she's out. And of course, bedtime sleep is a lot better now too. Bedtime's typically between 7 and 7:30, falls asleep almost immediately, and we pretty much have no night wakings now. If she does wake up, it's pretty minimal. I rarely will wake up in the middle of the night hearing her on the monitor. It doesn't mean she hasn't woken up at all, but she hasn't fussed. And then she's waking up between 7 and 8 every morning. So it's been really nice at night. Okay, so that was our sleep training journey. Now I wanna go over my top tips for helping your baby sleep through the night. There's some changes we made around this 4.5 month mark when we started sleep training that I think really, really helped her achieve the ability to sleep at night. So I've got about 8 tips here. The first thing you always hear is, of course, create a comfortable sleep space. Now you always hear people say, you want to darken the room. And when they say darken the room, they mean get it pitch black. And I have to agree, pitch black is best, at least for our baby. So in her room, she's got one window. We boarded that baby up with some blackout lining curtains. We added some blackout liners behind the curtains that were already in there, and I stuffed things over the top. And I used to open the blinds every time we would get her up to let some light in the room, but then it would be annoying and I couldn't really get it all the way black and all the way dark every time for her naps. So we just got it really dark and we just leave it like that now. We don't ever let the light in through the window in her room anymore. We just keep it that way because it's just easier, and keeping that room as dark as possible I think is so important. And I even shove a towel under the door after we close it to really get it as dark as possible. I think this has really helped with her early morning wakings that she was having. We weren't getting the room completely dark. And I think when she saw the light coming in, she would be like, oh, it's time to get up. And then she would be really fussy. So once we got that room completely dark and she can't really tell when the sun has come up yet, those early morning wakings really stopped. Another sleep environment must have, in my opinion, is a sound machine. We actually use 2 sound machines. We use her Hatch sound machine in there. And we also have her little portable sound machine, and we have both of those on at the same time. Her room is on the side where the main street is, and you know, sometimes we have these kids that ride their dirt bikes, and we live really close to a fire station and the alarm's going off, so the sound machine really helps us out. You know, at Christmas we had a big party here. Our house isn't that big and we had lots of noise going on, and she slept fine with the sound machine on. Also, play around with the temperature in her room. So for us it's a little tricky because the back rooms in the house, the air conditioning doesn't get to them as much with the vents. It's like smaller back there. So we actually had to put a little temperature sensor, like a smart temperature sensor, so that we know what the temperature is in her room, because it is not the same as the rest of the house. So now when we change our smart Nest thermostat, we set it to her bedroom. So we keep it at around 71 degrees in there, and we put her in a sleep sack from Kite Baby. So soft. Oh gosh, I love these sleep sacks. And we put her in a long sleeve sleep sack, 71 degrees, and we keep the fan on to keep some airflow in there, and that seems to be the sweet spot for her. My tip number 2 is to continue using pacifiers if you use a pacifier. I know some sleep training and some sleep coaches will say to stop the pacifier, but I just think having that level of comfort has really helped her out throughout the night. And like I said, as they get older, they will get better at putting it in their mouths. I recommend putting a bunch of pacifiers in her crib. She sleeps with 6 passies in her crib, plus the one in her mouth. We did introduce a little bunny lovey toy when we started sleep training, but we got rid of that after a couple weeks because I feel like she was too little to like understand. You know, maybe if you have like a 1-year-old that you're sleep training, they'll appreciate something like that. But if they're really young and they don't really like get it and they can't even like really grab things yet, it doesn't really make sense to use a lovey because, you know, she didn't really know what to do with it and would just like all of a sudden it would be underneath her and then it would be annoying and it would just be in the way. So that's my 2 cents on loveys. And with all those passies in there, you don't want them falling out. So I highly recommend they make these like mesh, I don't know if you call them crib bumpers because they're not really a bumper. It's like a mesh thing that you can put on the edge of the crib so that they can't get their arms or their legs stuck through there and the pacifiers can't fall out. So we use that and it's mesh so they can breathe through it. Just make sure it's on there tight so they can't, you know, get it undone and get tangled up in it or whatever. But we use that from the very beginning and I'm really glad we did. Another big tip that you hear from everyone is to create a routine. Have a bedtime routine and then your nap routine, make it a shorter, abridged version of your bedtime sleep routine. Now, this was kind of hard for us to do when she was napping while we had to wear her, or even if I was like wearing her to get her started sleeping and then tried to put her back in her little sidecar crib, because, you know, you can't really have a nap time routine if you're just putting them in the carrier and walking around. I guess that was our nap time routine. And I guess we did start to sort of condition her to think, oh, when I'm in the carrier, it's time to take a nap, because that's what we would do. So that would get her really sleepy. So we had to kind of retrain her brain. And once we started sleep training, that is really when we started to have a bedtime routine. And because even at bedtime, we were having to wear her in the wrap to get her really sleepy and then put her in her crib. So I truly believe once we started doing the same routine every single night, it just triggers her little brain to think, oh, it's time to go to sleep. And she gets so sleepy when we get into her room and we start doing her bedtime routine. And I do her last little breastfeeding session. She's just like falling asleep. Same thing at nap time. Whenever I go into her room and I turn off the lights and I turn on the little lamp, she yawns every single time because her brain knows, oh, we're about to do a nap. So briefly, our nap time routine, we go in there, we turn off the light, we turn on the little lamp, and then I go over, I change her diaper, I'll put her in a long sleeve, and then I'll put her on the ground, we'll put her in her sleep sack. We will go over to the glider chair we'll read a short little book, and then I will feed her on both sides. Then I pick her up, I burp her, I'll go over to her sound machines, turn on the Nest sound machine, turn on the other sound machine, and then I'll go turn off the lamp, and then I will put her down in her crib. I say the same thing every time. I say, Mommy and Daddy love you very much, now go to sleep. And I give her a little kiss on the back of her neck, turn off the light on the Hatch sound machine, and I'm out of there. Now, my next tip, if you are not doing this already, add a bath before bed to your bedtime routine every night. Before we started doing this, we were doing baths every once in a while, like every other day, every 3 days. She really didn't like baths when she was really itty bitty. She loves them now because she thinks they're so fun, but we were kind of dreading doing baths all the time. We would actually do them in the morning after her first nap because that was always when she was kind of the cheeriest. But once we started doing them before bed, the first time we did a bath before bed, she fell asleep right away. And it was the first time she fell asleep right away and like slept through the night. I really think a warm bath before bed just really helps her unwind and relax and wash the day away. And ever since then, we've been doing a bath every single night before bed. And I think it has made all the difference. So her bedtime routine is pretty much exactly like her nap time routine, except we do the bath, and after the bath, we go straight to the bedroom. So that bath initiates the bedtime routine. And for her bedtime routine, we also add giving her her vitamin D drops and brushing her little teeth. My other tip for sleep training, I kind of already touched on, but use a sleep training program or a sleep training course if you are overwhelmed or feel confused or just aren't really sure how to do it and aren't sure you'll stick with it if you're just kind of making it up as you go along. Just use a course. I'm not here to promote any single course. You know, I'm not like an affiliate for Taking Care of Babies, but that's the one we used and we really liked it. And a lot of gentle sleep training programs, like I said, they'll have you do pop-ins. And my tip for you is to not do a pop-in unless you really think it's needed. So just because it says do a pop-in at 5, 10, 15 minutes, you don't have to. Follow your gut. Also with that, follow your gut. If something seems like there's something really wrong with your baby or it looks like they hit their head or something, go in and check to make sure they're okay. Sometimes we'll do a pop-in just because she hasn't gone number 2 during the day and she's been fussy for a while. So we think, oh, maybe she went to the bathroom. So we'll go in and sniff her butt. You know, use your best judgment. With all of these programs, they're not going to be completely black and white, and just follow your instinct as a mama or a dada or a caregiver, whatever you are for this baby, just follow your instincts and just remember you know what's best for your baby. Okay, I'm not sure what number we're on, but on my phone it says number 7. My number 7 tip, timing is everything. I notice a huge difference when we get her down in that sweet spot when she's tired enough to go to sleep but isn't overtired. So I highly recommend, you can even just Google 7-month-old baby wake window, and you wanna try and keep them awake in that wake window, because a lot of times if I was putting her to bed too early, she would take a really short nap, and if I was putting her to bed too late, it would be really short as well. So a lot of that is just trial and error with your baby, and it's hard because it's always sort of changing because they're getting older, but just try and keep that in mind and really try and stick to those wake windows. And my last tip, number 8, is try a feeding before their nap. Now I know a lot of people, and what we did when she was itty bitty, because she was sleeping all the time, is we would feed her right after she woke up. I would nurse her, and that worked for a while. But once you start getting their naps a little longer and you want them to sleep longer, I think a lot of times she was waking up too early because she was hungry. Especially if your baby's a little bit of a snacker and they don't drink as much in a feeding, you know, you might need to do more feeding. So what we do now, and even when she was at 3 naps, I would feed her when she woke up from a nap, and I would feed her right before she went down for a nap. And now I wouldn't feed her to sleep. I would feed her till she was very, very drowsy. You know, she would get pretty drowsy, but I would make sure she was still awake. But I just feel like a lot of parents think that's like a no-no, like you shouldn't feed your baby right before they take a nap, because then they'll start to associate the feeding with nap time. But like I said, if you feed them before the nap and after the nap, you know, I think you're not really instilling that association as much. That's what we did, that's what we still do. And I think that feeding right before the nap just really helps her stay asleep longer. And those are all of my tips. Now I just want to talk about if I were to do it all over again. I've touched on this before, but I would not change wearing her for all her naps when she was itty bitty. I loved those close cuddles, and knowing now that we were able to sleep train her and have her sleep really well. I'm gonna do the same for the next baby if they like it. Something I would change though, once my back did start hurting though, once she got to 3-4 months, I do think I would have tried putting her in her crib a little bit sooner for naps. Just as she starts getting used to it, the couple days before we started sleep training her in her crib, we did a couple nights where we would sleep train her as she was going to sleep, and she fell asleep in like 15-20 minutes and then was like asleep in her sidecar crib. So it's one of those things where I think I'm going to give the next baby more opportunities to try and put themselves to sleep. With Junie, it was just as soon as she made a peep, I would be in here and like pop the pacifier back in her mouth or pick her up or breastfeed her back to sleep. So I think I'm gonna give the next kiddo just some more opportunities a little sooner because they might surprise you. Just like Junie did, I thought there's no way she's gonna learn how to put herself to sleep. She needs to be worn to sleep. There's no way this is gonna work. She surprised us, and within the first week, she was doing really, really well. All right, so that is about all I have for you for this video. Hopefully you got something out of it, whether you were just curious or maybe you learned a new tip to help you and your kiddo on your sleep journey. Please let me know in the comments below. I would love to know if there are any sleep tips that you swear by. If you do things differently than what I do, I would love to know in the comments below. And with that, I am off. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.